Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving up something in return. To obtain, something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. In those days, we really believed that to be the world's one and only truth.
Let's call back to my last two list videos. In the top 20 worst things about making gaming videos, I specifically called out Fullmetal Alchemist Dual Sympathy for costing too much. Well, while I was looking it up to get a screenshot of the price, I found a cheap copy and picked it up. And I wanted it because, as I said in the top 9 Gateway Anime series, Fullmetal Alchemist is an awesome show and I'd be happy to have a game based on it.
You know why I love reviewing licensed games? I never have to explain the story. Dual Sympathy follows the plot of the 2003 anime series. It doesn't add anything to it, but it does cut a whole bunch to keep the game moving from one action scene to the next, so it's not even close to a replacement to watching the show, so watch the 2003 series if you haven't. What? Funimation lost the rights a week ago? Well, hope Crunchyroll gets it soon like they will Brotherhood. The point here is the gameplay. It's one of those classic beat-em-ups I wish still got made. It's a lacking one. There's little variance in combat ability, more Golden Axe than Streets of Rage. Also, even for a handheld game, no co-op in a beat-em-up is kind of inexcusable. But since I'm lonely, I don't really mind. The game's a fun romp. There's in-game replayability too. Story mode is what you expect. Play through the entire game as Edward Elric, watch cutscenes, and play the occasional minigame. Every once in a while you'll get Alphonse by your side, but it's mostly a solo adventure. Don't lament Al's absence though, he's a dope. But beating the game unlocks character mode, which lets you play the entire game with minimal interruptions from the fights. It even lets you play as other characters like Scar and Mustang. There's no customization on the pairings though, each character has a set partner. Most of the time the partner is Ed or Al, who is also selectable, but there's no way to play as partners Maze Hughes or Riza Hawkeye, even in segments where you played as Al in story mode. Unlocking new characters is always a cool bonus, but here it's a missed opportunity. You play the entire game as Edward, aside from a couple Alphonse minutes, and I understand playing the majority of the game as him, but it sticks to the story and therefore doesn't have fights Ed wasn't a part of, which means some important fights are skipped. Playing the entire game as Ed should be a character mode thing, while story mode should switch between all characters depending on the scene. For example, despite being the only character on the American box art besides the Elrics, Scar is never fought. Armstrong should fight Scar, Izumi breaks into the command center, Scar fights Lust and Gluttony, and Mustang fights Hawkeye to get her into a tiny mini-skirts! Well, it's not as if the other characters are completely unrepresented. Any playable character can switch which type of attack alchemy they used, so you can unlock Mustang's flame alchemy or Armstrong's artistic alchemy to use anytime you want. And with some exploring, you can even unlock ones from non-playable characters. But honestly, default punches and Ed's cannon are enough to take care of any threat. The only other alchemy I use is Marco's Philosopher's Stone, because it can refill some health and health pickups are rare. Of course, being a Fullmetal Alchemist game, alchemy is a part of battle. There are two icons on the touchscreen, which is kind of annoying. The manual refers to them as button L and button R, but you can't use the DS's L and R buttons as a shortcut. It'd be easier not have to move my hands off the buttons. You've got both attack and defense alchemy. Attack is the one that can be switched, while defense is always a wall. They're both useful to get past obstacles during stages, either breaking obstacles or walking over them, and they're good during boss fights. But again, normal punches are good enough for standard enemies, so the alchemy is sort of underutilized. Maybe smart usage is required in hard mode. This is a DS game, so that's not the only time the touchscreen is used, and I'm not just talking about requiring it for the menus, which sucks already. Spread through the story are mini-games, which all use the touchscreen, either to untie ropes, chop wood, draw transmutation circles. It's harmless, if not needed. But this boulder running game sucks. You need to tap both sides of the screen in quick succession to run away. It's really hard to do on a DS, but it's impossible on an emulator unless you go frame by frame. If Desmoom didn't have that feature, I wouldn't be able to record the game. But you can pet the character on the main menu and get them to react. Yes, that is the English voice cast. A couple of them provide the handful of voiced cutscenes. It's just the dialogue from the show, but it's a good touch. I wouldn't have expected them to replace the Japanese voices. Mustang still sounds wrong, though.
Remember the pay.
Sound as a whole is a high point. The music in the game is surprisingly good. I'm a big fan of both Lior themes. Presentation as a whole is fine. The cutscenes are a weak spot, though. They're just still frames from the anime, and only a few have motion, with talking heads for the dialogue. Sprites are damn nice, though. Not that they have many frames of animation, but they're detailed without being big. I'm particularly a fan of Al's shading. It's the consistency of the polish that bothers me. They made 3 separate sprite sheets for Edward depending on his level of dress, but his dialogue portrait is always his red coat when he spends the majority of the game in the black jacket. Also, not every dialogue portrait has animation for talking. Considering how much a complete copy of the game goes for, usually $25, which is more than I paid for Chrono Trigger, I was kinda surprised to see the game was only 2 hours long. Beat-em-ups are short by nature, but this is still pretty lackluster. And the shortness is not helped by the easy difficulty. You're likely only going to die to a few of the boss fights. Well, I played one that's really hard, but spoilers. This game's difficulty, whatever there is cheap. Characters have no invincibility frames and long knockback, which makes it incredibly easy to get hit, be knocked back, and be hit again while you're recovering. It happens far too often, and the cheapness is not helped by the controls. Most of the time they're fine, but they need improvement. If alchemy won't be put on the shoulder buttons, the dash should be. I know the double tap dash is standard for this genre, but this game uses it more than the other beat-em-ups. And even after you stop, you'll always start moving with another dash until you move in another direction, which has caused me to fly off walls into traps. Speaking of other directions, vertical movements are awkward even on the 3DS circle pad, and turning around quickly is always a pain, especially after a jump. Despite the length, difficulty, and lack of depth, I had a good time with this game. It's just mindless, simple fun, and a good way to kill a couple hours. I'm definitely kinder on it because it's a Fullmetal Alchemist game, but it's a good Fullmetal Alchemist game. I totally recommend it if you're a fan of the series and you can find it for cheap.
And while it'll never happen, what with this game being 10 years old and Fullmetal Alchemist no longer being relevant, I'd love to see a sequel to this game. Base it on the manga/Brotherhood, add more complexity to the combat, co-op, and more levels. And more characters with the ability to choose between them freely and more variance between them. Make alchemy a cool character trait, but not necessary to complete the game so you can fit Ling in. And Ron fun, that's the important part.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. I'm also a part of a Let's Play channel you can check out if we ever upload, or you can look at my Twitter account where I've posted some strange things. I'm probably working on the next video now, so stay tuned.